You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Hey folks, it's Andy Polk, hot off the presses. Just last week, we did an amazing webinar featuring the COO of Rothys, as well as a representative from Centric Software, who is the leading, for footwear, is the leading provider of PLMs. And the conversation was so excellent around sustainability, supply chains, operations right now in the age of COVID and beyond. We wanted to bring this into the podcast form so we could spread it out so everybody could hear this great conversation. Rothys is an amazing company. They do things a little bit differently. They're sustainable from the start, but there's still a lot of ideas and best practices I think that you can learn from this. So I'm really excited to launch that. So with that, here is the audio from the webinar content. Hope you enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome to today's special webinar. I'm going to talk for just a few minutes as people keep coming into the room. We've got over 150 people signed up for this today. So as people come in, I'll just give you the rules of the road as we start off. This webinar is part of a special series that we've been doing for some time with Centric, and we really appreciate their partnership. And we'll get into what Centric is and what they do as the leading PLM for footwear. But we appreciate their support right off the bat for helping us run many of these content series that focus on some of the bigger challenges in the industry and building conversations around those to help other people adjust their blind spots and find tips and best practices as they realign strategies, especially as we continue to have supply chain chaos and as we hopefully emerge from COVID sooner rather than later, fully and officially. As we go through this today, this is being recorded, so you can always go back and catch the recording or pass it around to your colleagues. As we go through it today, the conversation will focus on many different topics of interest and note. As we discuss these topics, I encourage you, down at the very bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A. Click on that and ask your question in real time. We will get to the questions at the end, but I don't want anyone to forget what they were going to ask. So go ahead and drop that in there. We'll get to the end. And as we go through it, I just want to go ahead and kick it off. And I want to introduce, first of all, Heather Howard with Rothys, and then Colleen Grass with Centric. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves really quickly. Heather?
Hi, I'm Heather Howard. I work at Rothys. I'm the COO, and I've been with Rothys for the last 4.5 years, so almost from the inception, and have watched it grow and expand in these last 4.5 years. Prior to that, I was at Gap Inc., and then 7 years in London working for Anya Hindmarch, where I incidentally onboarded Centric in that complex manufacturing supply chain.
Nice. Colleen?
Awesome. Yeah, so my name is Colleen Grass. I am a regional director for Centric Software and based on the West Coast in California, a few hours down from where Heather is in San Francisco. I'm actually in South Orange County, and I've been with Centric for almost 6 years. I've been in the PLM space for about 7 or 8, but always have been in technology. But prior to that, kind of dabbled also on Heather's side with brands and retailers. And so it's been really nice to sort of marry those two different interests, both the technology side as well as the brand and retail side, selling Centric software. And so I actually brought Rothys into the Centric fold several years ago. And so it's been exciting to see Heather and the team over at Rothys, just to see the company growth and them expand into new categories and things like that. And especially, obviously, it's a fond thing to my heart, the sustainability piece. So I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me, Andy.
Of course, always. This is going to be fun because we're touching on all the hot topics. I'm based here in DC, and we always talk about the third rail of politics, and you don't want to touch it, you might get shocked. But today we're going to talk about the third rail of footwear politics with sustainability, supply chains, et cetera, that everyone keeps talking about. There's so much FOMO in this industry around how do they measure up on sustainability? How do they focus strategy around sustainability? Then you got other people really concerned about the continued insane supply chain issues that we're facing. Hopefully today we can talk a little bit about those issues and really flesh out some ideas that people can take back and look to see how maybe they can implement things or think things a little bit differently as they continue to work through these issues. Heather, right off the bat, sustainability has been a bit of a buzzword. We see constantly in terms of marketing, eco-conscious, eco-friendly. This is the greatest shoe made in the whole worldwide, planet. Saving the rainforest, etc. And it's gotten a little bit kind of. It's a really big. When you say sustainability, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I'm just wondering, as we start off, maybe you can set the stage for what does sustainability mean for Rothys and how do you approach sustainability?
Sure. In 2012, Roth Martin and Stephen Hawthorne-Thwaite set off to do something different. They had a dinner and they were like, we want to build a company. And in that dinner, somehow they came upon a shoe. And then they said, how could we do this differently? How could we do this in a sustainable way? And I don't think they, all great ideas at a dinner party come to, and you don't know what you're, about to learn. And as they set off on this journey, I think their eyes were really opened in how much waste is in the footwear industry specifically. And so that really drove their passion into figuring out a way to do this differently. And one of the ways that we are unique is we started out being a sustainable brand day one in using the materials that we use. We use recycled plastic bottles. We also use marine ocean plastics. And we created a shoe, and then later we created handbags with those materials and with all recycled materials or bio-based materials. And we wholly own our factory in China that produces these things. And so from there, we've just built on that footprint and gone from there.
Let's talk a little bit about sometimes when in this industry, we've got people who, kind of have deer in the headlight when it comes to sustainability, but you guys actually put out a really robust goal last year around circularity and kind of closing the loop. Can you just share what that goal was and then maybe how you guys are measuring where you're at and then where you're at in the process for those sustainability goals?
Sure. We are, so as we've grown in 2021, we began exploring the next frontier of sustainability in design and the end of life solution for every Rothys product that we put into the world. Though our shoes and bags are designed for durability, eventually a sustainable solution to unwearable products needs to exist. So we began that journey and we came up with 4 bold initiatives that we have started. And the first one was our pilot recycling program. We had people bring in their shoes to our stores. We did it for a week. And we were able to recycle 20,000 pairs of shoes. And in doing that, we're doing a few things. One interesting thing was 20,000 sounds like a lot. However, we actually struggled because people were like, I'm not ready to give up my Rothys. They're still in great condition. I can wash them. And they're not ready. I'm not letting go. So that was a great learning as well. And then, but also the work that we're doing on how to deconstruct our shoes, which leads to the next initiative is twice recycled materials. Because everything in our shoe is a natural or recycled product, it's easy to repurpose those materials. And so we're working on piloting is using these twice recycled materials into new products and deconstructing and reclaiming used materials to create something new. So that's the second initiative. So third is zero waste factory. This is super exciting, and we're one of the first in the industry to do this. But this year, our factory will achieve LEED and True Zero Waste certifications, validating that our factory is operating with green building practices and has achieved zero waste. And last but not least, we're working on full circular production. And Rothy's 2023 goal is our most ambitious yet. Not only will our products be crafted with majority recycled, twice recycled, and bio-based materials, but every Rothy's put into the world will have an end-of-wear solution.
Great. And what's interesting, you were talking about a little bit about the durability and the customer saying, I'm not ready yet. I think we forget in this industry that we are learning through the process, right? Like we set these goals, we get into it, we learn a little bit, we need to adjust and make pivots. But it's interesting because we make assumptions about how durable the product is, or like how it's used by the consumer. And as we get into this, we learn our assumptions may be a little bit off, and we can recalibrate and make those adjustments. So
no, absolutely. And it's, I've been a Rothy's customer for 4.5 years, and I don't have any shoes to give back yet. And you're the one saying I'm not giving back. Exactly. You can't have my shoes. And it's very much because of A, the craftsmanship, and B, the washability. Great.
And Colleen, I'll bring you into this as well, because I think more broadly, Centric PLM services a large swath of footwear brands. How are brands talking to Centric about this and trying to find solutions through Centric?
Yeah, so interestingly, like I said, I've been with Centric for almost 6 years, and I remember having some of these early conversations internally with Centric, both with the marketing team, and we have a whole entire team dedicated to innovation of our products. So one of our core principles at Centric is focused on innovation. And, I had spoken to the different groups, and probably even 3-4 years ago, at that point, it was already very apparent coming from customers, more specifically in Europe. Off the top of my head, I can think like Helly Hansen, for example, who are customers who already were focused on their own initiatives for sustainability, and were starting to work on ways to configure the product differently so that they could track different materials and things like that within Centric PLM. And so they were sort of already the forerunners on giving us insight as to what our customers wanted, taking that feedback and understanding, okay, maybe there's an opportunity here. How can we expand upon this? And so that just sort of has steamrolled over the last several years, and especially just in this last year, we partnered with HiGG. We'd been having conversation with them for quite some time. So now there's an integration to the HiGG index for our customers. But even without that, there is a vast majority of ways that our customers can grow and scale within PLM in order to capture that information. So it's very important, and it's something that I think all companies are to some extent striving to do. I mean, there's a lot of different regulations coming out of the EU, which are now having an impact on new regulations that we're going to see happening in the US. And so I think a lot of footwear companies are sort of scratching their head if they haven't already started down that road and even if they have, understand, how are we going to be able to track this back to the factory level? What if the factory is sourcing their own materials? How are we going to be able to track where those materials are coming from? So there's a lot of interesting information. And as you said in the beginning, Andy, it's very much an evolving system at this point that we're all, I think what we see right now and what we're able to do is going to evolve exponentially in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I'll echo that. There's already a lot of data and a lot of points we have to connect. And it's only expanding as we get more into LCAs and more, all this other scientific data. And you need a system to manage that data. And you need a system that will help you make better choices by looking at that data.
Right. So we could give an example. Go ahead, Heather.
I was just going to add that I think for companies where this isn't they're starting to look into this, that it is overwhelming. Like, where do I start? And it's starting with data. It's looking at the data, like start with looking maybe at your material. Where are they being sourced, or where is their excess? And as you start to just take one part of something and look through it, you can find some low-hanging fruit and start that way. And the same thing with carbon emissions, looking at your footprint and what are some of the lower hanging fruit areas. And again, what Colleen's talking about is helping you with that data go through that journey.
Right. Yeah. And I think also just the ability, like I can think of an example of a customer that's not a footwear customer, but big on materials. It's a company called Ardent. If you've ever purchased any sort of outdoor cushions or materials for outdoor cushions, let's say through Lowe's, Home Depot, that's where they sell their products. And they really looked at an opportunity where they thought, okay, well, and this is going back, I mean, they've been a customer for 10 years, over 10 years, but they thought, okay, well, how can we're now developing fabrics. How can we track that? And so the ability to attach a tracking number to a specific product or fabric that then gets information like the fabric composition, the yarn that's being used, the weight, what mill it was produced at, the entire timeline of its evolution. They can then go back years later and historically look back on that information. They can use that information to make better business decisions. So that's one of the things that I always really try to stress to people that are coming in to look at Centric and look at PLM as a first entry point. Maybe they haven't had a PLM system. They have different systems. They might have, they're using Excel, they're using Dropbox, they're using all these different methodologies, email to keep in contact with their factories. And that's all great and it works to some extent. But the challenge with that is taking that information and making intelligent business decisions out of those. So if you can bring all of that information into one central hub where a software can, run through those different attributes and can really make sense of the data, that's where you're really gonna, where the rubber meets the road.
We'll talk a little bit more about data around supply chains, because that is really, everyone's looking for the solution, right? A quicker way to get from the factory into the US. So, as we started off, Heather was talking a little bit about how they have their own factory base. And Heather, that's quite different than a lot of companies. A big company in the last couple of years actually had their own factory base and gave it up. And so where you guys are is kind of on the opposite side of where the industry has been in kind of working with people. So maybe speak a little bit about why you guys own your own factory and what is it able to allow you to do with supply chains and with sustainability.
Yes. In the very beginning, as they were doing the research on how to make this shoe, they were working with OEMs and they were just not able to get the final product that they were after. And so Roth was like, let's just do it ourselves. And he went to China and he built a factory. And owning our own factory, it plays into so many things in this whole circle. One is in the learning about how wasteful the footwear industry is. Owning your own factory, we can really own our production. We can do things just in time. We can do things out in the future. And through this chaotic supply chain of the last 2 years, we had 98% on-time delivery. And the 2% that was late was due to the port strikes, or no, sorry, not strikes, but port delays. And because we have our factory and very few suppliers that we pull from, we're in constant contact with all of that and we can plan for all of that. So we were not cut short where we were competing with other suppliers or other businesses for the business. And we were also able to keep our factory workers safe with the COVID protocols. And we did not have to shut down one day. That's
still the case? You guys haven't shut down so far with what's occurring?
Knock on wood.
All right.
No, and it's because, as it's gone, where everybody's in different circles of the stages of COVID hitting, and it's been quite intense in China right now, but we have not had to shut down our factory.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're able to do a lot of R&D in your factory. Then if you own your own factory, you're able to go in and say, this is taking too long, or this is too much water waste. Like, what do we do to curb that?
Exactly. And that's how we're getting these certifications, because we've gone in and we've looked at like all the, what are the trash bags going out of our factory? We've analyzed everything and to be able to be certified for zero waste.
Awesome. Talk a little bit about Fulfillment issues with Rothy. That seems to be obviously direct to consumer keeps growing year over year, but there are issues both in terms of delivering packages sustainably to consumers, but also maybe getting those packages back. How do you guys look at fulfillment and sustainability?
Well, we use, first off is our packaging. We use 95% recycled packaging materials, and we ship in our box. We do not ship a box in a box. So we ship our shoe boxes straight from the shelf. And then we partner with Happy Returns as our returns partner, because as we all know, there's a whole reverse logistics side to this and it's also increased immensely over the last 2 years because everybody was ordering from online. And Happy Returns is a company that has approached this in a sustainable way in that they have return bars all over the United States. So it eliminates customers having the old-fashioned way where you have to print out a label, tape it to your box, and take it into. Now you don't need to even have the box. You can return. So, for instance, Paper Source, you can return your shoes there, and then they've also created a reusable shipping container. So everything all the goods for all the companies that return, they transport in this reshipping container, and which has saved about something like 54 tons of cardboard for every million returns, which is incredible, and to be able to reduce that footprint on the cardboard front.
And we actually just had a working group call with our members about a month ago with Nordstrom where we were focused on this. And I had these assumptions that packaging was taken care of, right, around sustainability, but we found that there's still so much in terms of the dunnage and the packaging size and optimization, and then reusing the cartons. And so we actually have a report on packaging sustainability coming out. We did a survey of the industry about what the challenges were. And there's still a lot of brands who aren't quite there yet. So it's interesting to hear what you guys are doing and focusing on, especially around packaging. We also did a consumer survey last year where we asked about sustainable shipping, right? I have this notion that 2-day shipping is norm. And I'm just like,
right.
If I need a pair of shoes, I can run out to the store and get them if I need them that evening. But if I like a pair of shoes, I'm happy to have it take 5 days to get to my house and ground ship and save all that. And we ask consumers, if you got a coupon or like a rewards points, would you take 5 day shipping? And they're like, sure, for the same reason. So I think there's a exploration around fulfillment and packaging that we still need to explore in our industry. And I think we're starting to get there.
I totally agree. And I think to your point, customers' appetite if customers are informed, then they're okay with whatever that result is. It's when you're not informing them and they think they're getting their package in 2 days is when it becomes a problem. But if you're given a smart choice, customers very much take that smart choice.
Awesome.
I have a question on that in regards to the original idea for eliminating the box within a box. Was that something that you guys started out with, or did that come at a later stage? And was that something you had seen somewhere else, or was that?
No, that was day one was shipping that way. And I mean, one of the things that we stand by at Rothys, one of our pillars is that we want to do things better. We want to do better and do things right. So we often go slow. We launched in 2016 with just 2 silhouettes, the flat and the point. And we did that. We didn't go to market until we were ready. And we did that with this box solution. And so again, it's every corner. We're always thinking about how do we do this in the most sustainable way versus retrofitting something later.
Right. Because I think there's probably folks listening that would maybe aspire to that. And when I think about it from a data technology standpoint, I think about the fact that when with having, let's say, a PLM system in place, being able to incorporate the packaging as well as from a costing perspective and understanding what those margins look like and where you could essentially, increase margins, save on packaging. So having to sort of rethink the ways of doing business. I think sometimes, like you said, you started from this idea, and I think if I recall, Roth and his partner really didn't have necessarily a background in shoes at all. So I think sometimes those types of people have some of the most innovative ideas because they're not stuck in this.
They're not bound to old rules.
Exactly. And so I know you come from an experience where, like you mentioned in your bio, that you had been previously with a company in Europe that actually had adopted Centric. When you came to Rothys and you had been coming from that sort of traditional route, what were some of the different things that Rothys, was it, okay, we're going to go, because I'm hearing this from other folks, like, for example, Allbirds, like where it's like, we were deciding from day one that this was going to be the approach. But for those that are already in the industry and having to sort of readjust that approach, what would you say about that?
I think it's, again, to sort of start breaking things down, because if you go after everything, you're going to be overwhelmed and you're not going to do anything. But if you take, okay, supply chain team, let's take a look at our packaging. What are we doing? What could we do differently? Hey, materials team, where is there places where you can reduce waste, and go through, and each team brings something to the table to move that needle forward, I think is the best approach.
Yeah. One of the things that I also wanted to sort of mention that to Andy, that one of, like, because you guys own your own factory, you have much more control over that. But obviously there's a lot of folks out there that that's not their approach. They have many, many factories that they work with. And so from that standpoint, I think being able to utilize things like we have a project where, we have a factory audit module that allows folks to evaluate the factories and the suppliers that they're working with. It allows them to create checks and balances to make sure that the factories and the folks that they're working for are compliant in terms of whether it's from sustainability, in terms of like how they're making and manufacturing the product, to as well how those folks that are working in the factories, what those working conditions are. And obviously we've seen over the last, handful of years, some folks really getting in the hot seat for finding out that they had factories that were not adhering to best practices when it came to working with the folks in the factories, and some unfortunate situations. So I think that for those out there that are looking for a solution of how to communicate better and make sure that the suppliers and factories that they're working with are adhering to whatever their brand's level is in terms of meeting those requirements, that there are tools out there that will allow them to really evaluate and keep them in compliance.
Have, audits run out. There's an end date. Certifications have an end date. You got to get renewals. You got to manage that. You got to track it. Excel is probably the greatest productivity tool in the history of mankind, but we're at a point where we have too much flow happening everywhere, and too many, end dates and renewals and all that. And if you're tracking it in Excel, something will get lost in translation. So I completely agree with that. Let's get into materials. Because I know and we had a couple of questions on this in particular, but how does Rothy look at material selections, recycled content, bio? One in particular was about the outsole, in particular the materials in the outsole. But how do you look at material selections? What are you choosing? And then how are you expanding or growing selections?
So we often look at things on how to solve a problem. So by creating a shoe out of recycled plastic, takes recycled plastic out of the environment and puts it into a second use. And so we're always looking to innovate and expand our materials by looking at with that lens. And there's a lot of materials that are out there, like recycled leathers, recycled fabrics, and all those things. So looking into what is out there in the industry, what are plant-based, bio-based materials that we can use that have the least impact. And so that's where our focus is. And the way I always look at our business is that we're sort of always in two worlds. We're in our go-to-market launch world and that pipeline where we're always innovating as we go, but then we're also working on future innovation. We have a state-of-the-art innovation lab at our factory. We also have partnered with Alpargatas, a Brazilian company, that they have a state-of-the-art innovation center as well. And we're just starting to talk to one another of how do we leverage each other in those areas. Roth Martin is always thinking 16 years ahead of us. And so we're always working on innovation.
Let me ask you too about, when you're talking about circularity and trying to get two loops out of materials, does that go into your material selection strategy as well?
Absolutely. It's, how can we use if we recycle the uppers of our shoes, how do we spin that back into twice reused yarns and making product out of that?
Great. And then, Colleen, you had mentioned earlier, there was an integration you guys had worked on with HiGG where people can, within Centric, get access to the HiGG tool and better compare materials to make better decisions. Maybe you can briefly speak on that.
Yeah, so we created that partnership. We announced it late last year. And so we partnered with HiGG to allow our customers who are also utilizing the HiGG platform to be able to integrate with their PLM system in order to bring that information on materials back into the system. That's an ongoing relationship, and I'm sure will expand as we move along. We have probably about a dozen customers that are currently doing that and expanding upon that as well. Something else that's kind of interesting that we're doing is we have an AI tool that allows folks, when it comes to materials, and you think about, especially like for larger organizations, when you think about folks who are working with a lot of different materials, trims, et cetera, and keeping track of those, you can only imagine the amount of effort that goes into maintaining those libraries, et cetera. And a lot of times what ends up happening is those folks are in a rush and they might not be able to find something. Maybe it's not organized and they end up just ordering more in terms of samples. So we have a AI image search that allows them to take a picture basically of a material and be able to find information on that, which is then, connected back into PLM. So a lot of different ways to utilize the tool. HiGG, obviously we're very excited about that relationship, and it's really going to enable customers that are looking to reduce carbon footprint and things like that to really evaluate down to the material level and make decisions on what materials they're using. Maybe it's one synthetic versus another. Also just being able to look at, let's say if it's one synthetic, the different options as far as the way that fabric was dyed. There's a lot of different ways that will enable them to drill down and make better business decisions. I mean, ultimately, I think that everyone sees a future of having a tag on your clothing that has a QR code or has information just like you see on a food label that allows you as a consumer to make decisions. Now, I think as we have talked about in the past, how those consumers are going to digest that information and what they're going to be looking for, and it's a bit of an education. So I think there's opportunities there also for brands to look to be educating their consumers on what they should be looking for and helping to inform them about, because I honestly, it's funny because when I have conversations with just, some random person at a dinner party or what do you do for a living? And I explain it, I think people sort of scratch their head because unless you're in this industry and you're developing footwear, you don't realize what goes into creating the shoe that's on your foot. And so when you start explaining the process to someone, I think they're, kind of a light bulb goes off. And so when someone walks into a store or they order something online, if they were to order a pair of Rothys, I think Rothys is doing a great job and they're reaching a consumer. And, Heather, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, but I think you guys are reaching a consumer that's already educated and is looking for to be able to purchase and outfit and clothe themselves in things that are important to them because this is what they see as the future and they want to support sustainable companies and that's sort of their vision. But for the average person that maybe hasn't quite been educated on that, I think there's definitely an opportunity. So I'd be interested to think what you think about that, Heather.
I think it's great. I think we come from two approaches. One is some customers come to us because they are like, oh, I see this stylish shoe that I want to try on. And then they try it on and I call it the oh moment. That every time, if you're in a store and someone's trying our shoe on for the very first time, the universal reaction is, oh, these are so comfortable. And so some come in because they see a beautiful shoe or a fashionable shoe that works for their wardrobe, but then they quickly learn what our mission is and how the shoe was made. And then they get excited around that. Then you also have the converse where this is how I want to shop. I want to support brands that are being sustainable and thoughtful in the work that they do. And so, but either way, it creates this incredible flywheel of word of mouth to our customers to learn not only do they make this beautiful, comfortable shoe, but it's durable, washable, and sustainable.
Awesome. You're on mute, Andy.
Yeah. Heather, really quickly, when you guys are taking back product and you're doing the recycling, is that in-house or do you work with a partner to try to upcycle or downcycle?
We're currently working with a partner to do that.
Yeah. And I think to speak about the recycling is very difficult, obviously, because of design and construction issues, the multiple materials, the backing, the adhesives, everything that goes into that. And so we've seen, 2 years ago, we started looking at facilitating recycling conversations and trying to bring brands together and trying to build a facility to do that. It was super difficult because of the RSL issues, because of construction. We started to realize it wasn't just a blue collar job where someone sits there, but it's actually a very high-end white collar or green collar job where you have to know the chemicals, you have to understand, the different types, the materials. And so we see a lot of companies moving to working with partners as they build their knowledge and capacity internally to then start to pivot, right? So it's that idea of there's no huge great option that solves.
No, there's no great, just call so-and-so and got you sorted. No, this is all very much a learning. And, we started a sustainability council so we could bring experts together along with us to tackle these problems. And you're absolutely right. As we've been working on Saskia, who's our head of sustainability, is just a phenomenal human and so well educated and is driving these initiatives for us. She's done a ton of work and is a great resource to anybody and is always willing to meet with people and talk with people because we want to share what we're learning. And we share a lot of it on our blog, on our sustainability page on our website, but she's done a ton of research on all of this.
Let's get into kind of the final conversation around tech and operations. And I think, let's just talk a little bit about digital transformation. I have this joke where everybody assumes digital transformation is using a Zoom call and holding up a shoe and talking about it, right? And that's not exactly the digital transformation we should be thinking of coming out of COVID. So maybe let's just quickly talk about that and the process that Rothys is going through with PLM, and maybe you can just speak about, you've spoken a little bit, and we talked a little bit about the why, but a little bit about the process and what you're hoping to get out of the PLM.
Absolutely. One thing that occurred to me as Colleen was talking and all the different things that PLM can do for us, one of the things that we don't mention is the simplification in terms of, we talk about Excel is the greatest thing. But as I think most of us know that Excel goes, then there's this spreadsheet, then that spreadsheet, then you got to update that spreadsheet, and don't forget that one. And what Centric allows you to do is eliminate half the documents and half the spreadsheets that everybody's updating and forgetting to update one, because it lives in one central source. And so I think just from a human perspective, it just makes life much easier for people who work in design and product development and our factory. We're able to work directly with our factory through this process and eliminate the 49 different other manual steps that existed before Centric. So for us, again, trying to gain efficiencies in our process. And we partnered with Centric, I think about 3 years ago, and we used it, I'd say Centric Light. We weren't using it to its fullest capabilities. And partly it was just because we were young and growing so fast, and we were just going. And so we made a conscious effort. Sorry, the doorbell's ringing. We made a conscious effort in this last year to say, okay, we're going to slow down and we're going to redo the process and launch it in its full capacity. And so we're about 97% there. And it's been transformative for the teams. It's always hard work to do this, and it's painful. But once you get to the other side, the fact that you can eliminate the 14 different places that everybody's having to update and have one central source of truth that can also then feed your other systems is amazing.
I mean, maybe you can speak to this too, more broadly.
Yeah, so I could speak to that in the sense that, I mean, for those that aren't too familiar with what Centric has to offer, we do offer as Heather put it, a Centric Light. We call it our SMB, or small medium business product. And that is what we originally launched Rothys with when they came to us about a little over 3 years ago. And that is really designed for teams, I'd say anywhere. I mean, I know now we go down to, I think, about 5 folks, but it was kind of originally designed for teams of 10, upwards to 30 users, including the factories. Because what we saw was there were a lot of folks were coming to Centric that had, I mean, all brands have the same challenges when you're talking about different data and managing materials and dealing with suppliers and factories. Everyone's got the same issues. They just scale as you get bigger. So with that in mind, we thought, well, how can we produce a product that is basically Centric PLM, but just dialed back for those folks who don't have an entire PLM team to implement? So we created this small medium business product, which has grown exponentially over the past 5 years. And the great thing is it allows folks to come into the Centric fold earlier on in their entire life of a company, or at least their journey with PLM. And as whether they grow from a financial perspective or in terms of number of employees and the business is growing, that they need more robust modules and things like that. There's that piece of it. But then there's also just for those folks who maybe had started with another PLM that was much more rudimentary or just never really scaled as far as innovation goes. It gives those an opportunity to come in and continue to scale and grow as well. So as I mentioned, we take feedback from our customers in order to really understand. And that's how we really came to the sustainability piece, was understanding that there were a lot of folks that were asking questions and wanting further information. So we've launched a whole CSR initiative focused on that. And so, yeah, I mean, if folks have questions, I'm more than happy to take some phone calls and learn more about what their specific needs are.
It will be interesting to see as we continue to collect that ESG data, what we're able to do with it through PLM and start making decisions and get to the wisdom, right? We keep talking about building the sustainability knowledge, and what we're trying to do with FDRA and our programs and things like this is let's get to the wisdom, right? Like how do we actually make those decisions?
Yeah, and actually, Tentree, which is a smaller customer of ours, they're focused on they're based out of the Pacific Northwest as well, and they're focused on planting trees for every t-shirt they sell, and they're small, but they're growing quite rapidly. And that was, as Rothys was one of their initiatives straight off the bat when they started the company, was to really try to grow in a sustainable way. And I mean, really, Derek says that was only achievable with technology. I mean, you need software, you need technology in order to make sense of this data and in order to make informed decisions. So when you're talking about many, many different materials for footwear and the factories that you're working with, you need some place to bring all of that information together to make sense of it all. And that's really the bottom line.
Yeah. And you mentioned that was a small company. So you guys service, people may think PLMs are for large companies, but it's all sizes, correct?
It really is all sizes. I mean, we range anywhere from 10 users up to upwards between 10 and 20,000 users for a brand. So that's we run the gamut.
Yeah. Heather, I do want to ask too, I think you're working from home. How, in terms of like operations with all your teams, are you guys at a flex schedule? Are you guys just allowing people to work from home, or do they have to be in the office? Like, what's the...
Yeah, we are. And actually, normally I'm in the office. We just had a somewhat contact of COVID case. So I'd said, I'm just going to be safe and stay home today. But yes, no, we are back at our office, but it is a total flex schedule. And we have had a few people that have moved out of California that are still working for us, and it's working really well.
Yeah, and I think that is to where we are with digital tools, right? Like able
Absolutely.
to have Zoom calls, but also use things like PLM to make sure we're all synchronizing around the same. When we're talking about the purple fabric, we're all seeing the same purple fabric, right? It's not a...
Exactly. And normally we would be traveling to our factory in China, and probably a lot of people on the call would be traveling as well. And nobody's been able to go, or most people have not been able to go to their factories in the last 2.5 years. And so it's even more important to be organized and be working from the same source of truth on your production.
Colleen, let me ask you really quickly around supply chains, because we know that every single CEO has all of a sudden realized that there's a thing called supply chain and it's costing a lot of money, and somebody better fix the problem and save the company and speed up the process, right? So when you guys talk to your customers over the last year, how has PLM helped people just get line of sight into those different cost avenues that they're trying to just see where, are they able to see industry averages? Are they able to judge where they are and try to make decisions about where to cut, or, how to funnel things down better?
I think you see a lot of different areas that it can help in terms of like Heather mentioning not being able to go to the factories. I think that was what I saw when the lockdowns first started. Everything sort of came to a grinding halt, and very quickly it became apparent that if you had not already embraced some sort of online tools to communicate, you were kind of, stuck in the water. And so, for us, it was interesting because it was unfortunate for a lot of brands. You saw a lot of brands that struggled and ended up going out of business for it. But it really ripped the Band-Aid off. And I think when you go back and you look at interviews that were right after lockdown happened, a lot of these CEOs and COOs will tell you, I mean, we were just making it up as we went. We had nothing to go off of any historical ways of doing business. So we just kind of did what we thought was best. But for sure, what we saw was focused on, we had several, we even came out with a really quick deployment option for folks that were coming to us saying, hey, do you have anything you can do? We need to get up and running ASAP. We can't get to our factories, we can't get samples delivered, etc. And so we came up with a couple real quick solutions for that. But we did see, and what I see across the board from folks, anyone that I'm speaking to currently, folks that I've signed over the last 5-6 years, it is just overall enabling them to see a level of granularity that they just maybe they could see it, but it was taking a lot of bodies to do it and a lot of time. So when you can go from, creating a tech pack in what normally would take you days to do to a couple clicks of buttons, then that is a massive improvement to your overall supply chain process, and being able to understand from a factory level and be able to communicate with your factories on a much more efficient way, because they're in the system and they, when it's daytime on one side of the globe and nighttime on the other, like you almost have this 24-hour cycle of doing business in today's world, that technology definitely helps in that situation. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's 2:49 now, so we'll get to a few questions. I've tried to answer some as we went through it, the ones that we could, and I asked some in real time as we went through. But if you have questions, now's the time to drop those in as we cover some of these things. This one, Heather, in particular, is how you track carbon footprints of your recycled vendors. And I think let's not get into the nitty gritty of this, but how do you guys think about your carbon footprint and how are you trying to better track it?
Right now, we partner with Flexport on all of our shipping, and we offset all of our carbon emission that way. And we're further growing that.
Okay. And then there's another question around like chain of custody with materials. And again, it's a little bit in the weeds here, but when you're certifying your products and you're looking at chain of custody, is that also how important vendors are to it?
Yes. I mean, and we make sure we certify and test every product so that whatever we produce, that we can stand behind, that it is 100% accurately certified and we're labeling it accordingly.
Yeah, and I think that's important to talk about because that's where the industry is headed, instead of just taking something from a vendor and then saying this is 31% recycled, and you say great, and you throw it up on your website, then all of a sudden, maybe it's 20% recycled.
Yeah.
And then so we do have to get to this certification where the whole trust but verify, and I've seen a movement over the last year where more and more companies are requiring vendors and suppliers to get that certification. And working more and more with certification bodies like Leather Working Group or Textile Exchange, and all those bodies that are on the ground doing all that good work. Let's see. I think we answered this question around like owning your manufacturing facility in China. They're asking why China. Well, I can answer this for you. The Chinese produce 70+% of all the shoes imported into America. They have the scale, they have the skills, the material supply chains are there. They don't have quality defects like you will see somewhere else globally. So obviously it makes that there is a lot of shifts that are taking place with production, and people are looking outside of China because of risks. But actually we see an increase of production in China, and it's a great tee up, Trey, because we are having a global sourcing summit in New York in July that you can attend. And you can learn all about this and more. So look up FDRA.org for that event. And hopefully, Trey, we will see you in New York. Thank you for that. Another question on tariffs. Go ahead, Colleen.
Well, I was just going to give you a plug and just say what you had told me the other day when I asked about this, how folks could get involved.
Yeah, listen, and someone asked the same thing. It's like, how can I get more access to collaborate with brands? And FDRA has a very robust sustainability working group where we foster Zoom calls just like this every single month. We just did one on biomaterials, kind of understanding the biomaterial science and what's happening and how to choose better biomaterials. We have one on LCA that'll be coming up in July, where we're focused around understanding LCAs and walking through one so brands can better understand what to look for when they're presented those and making better decisions. So, and we've had a lot of discussions around recyclability and trying to just build resources and tools that help people skill up really quickly. So you can learn a lot about that at shoesustainability.com. That's our resource center about all our different programs. But FDRA is a nonprofit, and our whole focus is bringing companies together to say, we're not competing in these areas, right? We can compete in the marketplace and let the best person win with the best product, but we're all making shoes the same way, and we're typically using same vendors. So how do we work together and communicate how we want to increase sustainability, reduce costs, increase compliance, and we work a lot on that. So thanks for that plug. And also, see the question here on tariffs. We also work on tariffs, so we can help our members classify their shoes, and look to find tools like MTB or FTAs to try to find other source locations to reduce it. But yes, the tariff is extremely high for footwear, and there's no hiding that, and that gets passed along to the consumer. And that's why we've been very adamant in communicating to the Biden administration about eliminating 301 tariffs out of China to lower costs in the marketplace.
Do you see more resources becoming available in the US, or do you feel that that is just so far down the road that?
It's so limited in what we're producing here in the US with the manufacturing. A lot of it's mold injected. You do have assembly done by New Balance, which they figured out their model. Keen has assembly and manufacturing. Danner in Portland does as well. But typically you're going to see product made in the US. It's going to be more automated. The materials are going to cost more and the price points are higher. So you can serve a niche customer base in the US if you're making here. But I mean, New Balance's shoes are still what, 160, 170. So you got a lot of people in the US who may not afford those, and you need to still import shoes at certain price points in order to hit your different layers of consumers based on their purchasing power. So there's a lot of conversation around local for local. More what we see is people going to Mexico and looking for capacity and saying the US is still quite pricey and there's nowhere I can really go in as a brand, work with the factory. All the factories are pretty vertical. So they're going to Mexico more and more, or, looking in Brazil, looking Dominican Republic to try to find that. But I still think even that we have to do a lot of work around material capacity development and factory development. And as big of a challenge it's also a huge opportunity to make green factories from the start. We just heard Rothy today say, we started from the start looking at sustainability this way. Great. Well, if we're going to build these capacities, let's build it green at the start. My hope is brands can work closer together and generate that demand that gives somebody the ability to put capital towards risk, right? Like that's really what has to happen is brands got to get together and say, we do want to make here, or we do want to make here, and we'll back it and we'll put in orders. And so that, and then otherwise, I also think about green funds and green bonds and any kind of finance, because I think it does require a lot of money to establish production for footwear and set up those supply chains. And I'm hoping someone along the way will look at footwear and say, you know what, let's set up a green fund, and we're not looking for any return, but we just want to invest and build this capacity for the good of the world. So I'm hopeful for that. So a lot of challenges, but we're not pessimists, we're realists, but we're also super optimistic at FDRA about what's happening. And we represent a lot of domestic manufacturers, and we try to figure out what's happening and how they're doing it and help other people who come to us and say, I'd like to make locally. And we're like, all right, we'll try to help you figure it out as best we can. So there's a lot of that happening, but it is very limited because of the supply chains. And I think, for us, the first step we're trying to look at is like, how do we better build capacity in Vietnam? Because that's a step out of China. So it's like steps and waves out of trying to do that. So we're actually trying to work with the Vietnamese government right now to look at gaps in material capacity in Vietnam and help fill some of those. Because we're seeing it again, right? The material supply chains from China going into Vietnam, the Vietnamese factories are very worried because there's these disruptions again, just like we saw at the first part. So we're still in the same, like we haven't solved some of the problems we have, unfortunately. But we're continuing to look at that. So
I do think, though, you're starting to see big brands collaborate with little brands and do things a little bit differently and do capsules. So, we've always been in this industry, you're always so, keep everything private. But the more that we can start talking to one another and sharing ideas and working on a venture together to do something bigger and better, to like, how do you recycle all types of shoes? Those kinds of things is what's going to move the needle.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The sustainable future is collaboration.
Exactly.
Right.
Mic drop. Thanks, everyone. No, I'm kidding.
We're done.
I don't see any more questions. Well, maybe I do. Okay, let's see. We produce travel bags and goods. Contact me. I can tell you who to help with travel bags and goods. We have a partner who'll work on tariffs and supply chains around that. It's info@fdra.org. Just drop us a line and someone on our team will help you out. US-based production, someone we asked that. Special tariff codes for footwear using environmental materials. Lance, what a surprise.
And Lance, I'm with you.
Yes, we are working on that to try to figure it out. And as Lance knows, working on customs issues, it is very difficult to thread the needle between what's environmentally conscious and how you thread it through the WTO and the tariff code here in the US that was made in the 1930s. Imagine what kind of shoes were made in the 1930s. I don't think they'd be too comfortable. All right, and then let's see. Yeah, just, Trey, you can just email. If you go to fdra.org, all our emails are on there. You can drop us a line. With that, it's 3:00, so we actually hit our time. Perfect. Heather, really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. We know you're, overseeing a lot of different operations there at Rothys, and we appreciate all the eco-conscious ways that you guys are making footwear and helping share that intelligence and the great team that you guys have there. And look forward to having you guys more involved and helping share more ideas and tips just like this. And again, Colleen, really appreciate Centric and their support and helping fund this series that we're running to have these conversations. Did I miss anything that we need to talk about? I felt like we covered a lot of ground in an hour.
I think we did. We really did. Thank you so much for hosting this. This was great.
Absolutely. Folks, I do encourage you to visit fdra.org and take a look at any data or any services that we can provide you support on. Most of everything that we provide for members is free. If you're not a member, I'm happy to talk to you about that too. As a nonprofit, we do encourage people to sign up. We're super affordable, and we can have a real positive ROI impact on your bottom line in a variety of ways. Thank you for joining us today. If you have any other questions, and I do always want to encourage at the end, if you've not done a demo with Centric to CPLM and talk to them about your problems and how they can help you, please reach out. You can contact me, and I can put you in contact with Colleen and the team at Centric. But don't wait to do that. Wherever you are in your footwear journey, it behooves you to take a look. Or if you've been using something and it's not working out for you, I encourage you to call them and see how they can better help you. At this point, Colleen, God, I don't know how many brands you guys have in the footwear space, but it's pretty overwhelming. Do you know the number?
I don't want to throw one out. I should have known that. No, but I mean, I can tell you that we have we've surpassed 600 customers, which encompasses probably over 3,000 plus brands globally. So we're everywhere.
Well, what I like about it is that you have a footwear team and you know footwear really well as a company.
Absolutely. So. Yeah, and the other thing I'll point out is that we do all of our own implementations. So everyone that like Heather's team is working with at Centric as we expand their PLM footprint all works for Centric. They've all either come from the industry. Generally we're going to always line people up on that implementation side with those that have been, more attached to footwear versus apparel or what have you, multi-category retail. So we really work hard to have the best employees, best team, and therefore the best customers. So you're in good hands.
So that was a fantastic conversation. A lot of takeaways around operations, technology, how to think about sustainability, what's happening in our industry. It is very difficult, obviously, with sustainability and supply chains, but people are finding ways forward. So hope you enjoyed that. As always, go back to our full catalog, shoeandshow.com. We have hundreds of episodes there talking about similar topics. You can go in and actually use different hashtags to find different topics and issue areas. And we do encourage you to, if you enjoy this conversation or any others, or ever have conversations or have tips on what topics we should discuss or who else we should have on shoeandshow.com at the bottom left, there's a little voice note. You can click that button and you can actually leave us a voice note. The best ones will get played on air. But we do enjoy hearing from folks about what we should be talking about because this is your podcast, the Footwear Industry Podcast. Thanks again for listening. And tune in next week when we launch another great podcast on Monday morning. Till then, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.